wanted to share with you the interview that I did with Stanton Friedman. And he is an amazing UFOologist. He's been studying UFOs for 60 years. He was the first civilian investigator to document the crash landing site of Roswell, New Mexico. So we just got done doing the segment here at Ozark Fox AM, and now I'm going to be sharing with you this amazing interview that I did with him, because there was a couple of reports that took place most recently, about 10 days ago, over Ireland. It wasn't just one airline, it was several airlines that saw these UFOs moving around. It didn't show up on radar, but the pilots saw it with their own eyes. And Stanton Friedman, he actually, you're going to hear this in the interview, but he actually said that these are in fact UFOs. And they're doing something with plasma. They ionize the air around the craft, which allows them to absorb the radar signals and not reflect it. And that's why it doesn't show up to conventional radar signatures. But yet the pilots are seeing it. And it's not just one pilot, it's multiple. And so I had an amazing conversation with him. I was so lucky that I was able to get this interview on such short notice right after it happened. It was so relevant. And we're going to keep doing this. So here we go. This is my interview with Stanton Friedman, an amazing guy and a great interview.
The most recent book is Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers with Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's niece.
Okay.
And we go into, the subject of UFOs includes all kinds of stuff, some of it garbage. And so we've tried to look at the facts, the data, the solid information. There's a lot of misrepresentation. I've reached four major conclusions.
Okay.
After 60 years of study and investigation. Only 60, but I'm only 84, so I started late.
Yeah, all right.
One, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs, underline the some 23 times, are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about them. The second conclusion is we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate. That is to say, some few people within various governments have known that it is true that we are being visited for a very long time. The third is there are no good arguments against the first two conclusions. There are people who haven't studied the relevant evidence, but that's a different thing. Uh-huh. And fourth, we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth, successful cover-up of the best data, bodies, and wreckage since more than 70 years, since Roswell. I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident.
I want to hear all about that. I don't know if now is the appropriate time to go into that, or you might want to finish making your opening remarks here.
Well, that sums things up in a nutshell. A little background may be useful. I've given more than 700 lectures in all 50 states, 10 provinces, and 19 other countries. Mm-hmm. So I get around. I've answered tens of thousands of questions after my lectures and classroom visits, during interviews of all kinds. So I've had a chance to hear all the anti-arguments, none of which hold up. And I bring to the subject that one of the peculiar things is that I worked under security for 14 years. I understand how security works. I get people telling me all those guys from Majestic 12 would have told their wives what they were doing. When you have a security clearance and you learn things that are classified, you don't tell your wife anything. It goes with the territory that you keep your darn mouth shut. Okay. The penalties are very severe. Okay. I also, because I have worked on far-out propulsion systems, have heard all kinds of terrible articles about or items that you can't get here from there. It's too far. It would take too long. It would take too much energy. Yeah. These are all nonsense. If you make enough stupid assumptions, you can prove anything is impossible. But, for example, I've asked audiences, how long does it take at 1G acceleration to get close to the speed of light? Everybody has heard of Einstein's speed of light's a limit, Stan. Look how long it's going to take to get here from someplace else. So I give them a question. How long does it, multiple choice, how long does it take at 1G to get to the speed of light? 1,000 years, 100 years, 10 years, or 1? How many think it's 1,000? How many think it's 10, et cetera? Right. The answer is 1, less than a year. At 1G acceleration, which is the force of gravity right here where we are, to get close to the speed of light. It's close meaning 99.999, et cetera. And the other part, again, back to Einstein, what people tend to forget, okay, part of the story is you can't go fast in the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
Another part is as you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for the things moving that fast. And people look at me like I'm nuts. Why is that? I said, that's how God created the universe. I don't know why it is, but it matters. Because when you get to 99.999% of the speed of light, the time dilation, as it's called, is extraordinarily important. You go out, come back, marry your granddaughter's best friend because she's aged and you have. You get the idea. Right. Now, that's real world. We have accelerators, that large Hadron Collider over at Switzerland, France border, 99.999% of the speed of light, those particles go. So this is not a realm that we're unfamiliar with. Nobody has their own private accelerator. I'm not making particles that go that fast, but I'm not making this up either. Now, it is interesting. I'm a nuclear physicist, and that's important here because when we went nuclear in our world, things changed. A big bomb during World War II was a 10-ton blockbuster, released the energy of 10 tons of dynamite and made a big mess, a big hole in the ground,
Right.
Okay, that was in 1943 for the war, 44, 45. First A-bomb, 1945, 15,000 tons of dynamite. That's how much energy was released. The first H-bomb, which is a fusion device, H stands for hydrogen, released the energy of 10 million tons of dynamite. That was 1952. The biggest H-bomb that's been tested, the Russians tested Tsar-Bomba, not my name, their name, released the energy of over 50 million tons of dynamite. One stinking bomb. And I use the adjective advisedly. I'm not a pro build more bombs kind of thing.
Right.
But you realize we on Earth have tested more than 2,000 nuclear weapons. And we just discovered X-rays in 1897. We didn't discover the neutron until 1932. The planet is 4 billion years old. So, and the universe like 13 billion. What I'm saying is, every civilization would have asked, how does that star of ours produce its energy? We didn't find out until 1938, nuclear fusion. So for 4 billion years or more, the planet's been around, and we didn't know what the heck was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had talked about nuclear fusion 100 years ago, you'd have thought I was crazy. We didn't have any way of measuring it to know about it. We were ignorant.
Right.
Now, every generation thinks it knows more and all there is to know, and it knows more than everybody's gone before, which may be true, but it doesn't know all that's coming in the future. So one of my mantras, technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. Now, one of the other things that's changed, when Frank Drake, an astronomer, is still around, I think he's a little older than I am.
Wow.
When Frank talked about listening for signals from outer space in 1960 or so, he thought there might be as many as 6,000 places that are sending signals. In other words, 6,000 planets. Today, thanks to the Kepler satellite, among others, we now know that there's on an average 1.6 planets per star. Now, that doesn't sound like a big number until you realize that within a mere 100 light years of here, there's 10,000 stars. It implies 16,000 planets. The galaxy has 100 billion, maybe 200 billion, but it's a big number of planets, of stars. So it's more than that planets. So suddenly, instead of us being the top of the walk, we're the big shots in the neighborhood.
We're it. It doesn't get any better than us, right?
That's right.
It's
No more
just us.
advanced, no better than us. And,
Yes.
you know, I have to laugh. Bishop Ussher in 1643 or so said the earth was created in 4004 BC. He left out 6 zeros, 4 billion four maybe.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is our perspective has changed drastically. And the nuclear is an important part because the sun is a fusion factory. All the stars are fusion factories, some big, some small, some old, some new, etc. But I believe that every civilization would have scratched its head and said, how the heck does that star produce all that energy? And they would realize that it's nuclear fusion. I'm not saying there's nothing more advanced than fusion. We don't know what might be more advanced than nuclear fusion. But I worked on a study of deep space travel using fusion propulsion systems way back in 1962. That was an Air Force sponsored study. I was at Aerojet General Nucleonics.
Mm-hmm.
And our conclusion was, if you got the dough, you can go.
Right.
A lot of dough. And one of the things that's tricky here is many people think of research as a few professors, a few grad students, you know, published papers, etc. That's an underestimate of what's going on. When I worked on nuclear airplanes at General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, Cincinnati, Evendale, Ohio, way back in the late 50s.
Can I just interject a question here because this is fascinating. So
Sure.
You're talking about nuclear propelled airplanes, and this is in the timeline compared to nuclear submarines, nuclear powered surface ships. Is this before they were after or at the same time that they were making those
the nuclear navy came along before we did. That's one thing that encouraged the program. But that program at General Electric spent $100 million in 1958
on nuclear powered planes.
Yeah, on the development of nuclear powered planes. We never flew a nuclear powered aircraft.
Okay.
Excuse me. We operated jet engines on nuclear power, which was quite impressive indeed, out at the nuclear test site, not far from Area 51, out in Nevada, where there's lots of sand and not many people, you know, if you stay away from Las Vegas. But what I'm trying to get at is, within my lifetime, we've gotten to the point where we have a far greater understanding of what might be going on out there. And the notion of travel between the stars, which sounds ludicrous at first to some people, because you can't get here from there and it takes too much energy, et cetera, isn't too far out at all. If you want to spend the dough, you can go. So that's important. Secondly, we have a question of motivation. Why would aliens come here? Why don't they land on a White House lawn? You know, as if the President of the United States spoke for the planet.
Sure.
Thank goodness he doesn't, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So when you stand back and look at the larger picture, also, the next star over from the sun, kids learn this in school, 4.3 light years away. That's quite a distance. We know that there are loads of stars that have other stars within well under a light year, just down the street.
Wow.
Have neighbors. And I figure the closer you are to your neighbor, the more likely you are to try to go there.
Sure.
You know, you're going to look carefully and see, oh, look what's over there. And also, I think every civilization will realize that there could be a catastrophe. We better be ready for an alternative place to go if something terrible happens.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, a meteor, big meteor, lasts the planet, like ended the lifetime of the dinosaurs, let's say.
Sure.
So you got to be ready for an alternate location.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So what I'm saying is we've come of age in the nuclear age. And one thing, we didn't operate a nuclear airplane. But when I was at Westinghouse Astronuclear Lab in the late 60s, we and Aerojet General and Los Alamos each operated a nuclear rocket engine on the ground tested.
Mhm.
Now, they were less than 8 feet in diameter, which doesn't sound very impressive until you realize the power level. At Westinghouse, ours had a power level of 1,100 megawatts. Now, I'll give you perspective on that.
Sure.
Aerojet was 1,000. Los Alamos was 4,000 megawatts.
And this was
Over
1100?
We Westinghouse was 1,100 megawatts, million
Okay.
watt.
Okay.
Aerojet's was 1,000 megawatts, and Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory in New Mexico. Their Phoebus 2B, flightless bird Phoebus, operated at a power level of 4,000 megawatts. The exhaust temperature of the liquid hydrogen that went in very, very cold came out at over 4,000 degrees. This is in the late 60s now. I'm not talking last week. I'm talking the late 60s, almost 50 years ago.
Wow.
So the programs were very successful. And what did the government do? They canceled the program. They needed an Admiral Rickover who pushed the nuclear navy,
Sure.
and they didn't have one. But what I'm saying is the notion that some people have that star travel is impossible, you can't get here from there, so nobody could come here because we're the smartest guys around, is nonsense. And I want to give them that sense of perspective because to me it's very exciting that my great-grandson, could grow up at a time when we're ready to go to the stars, if we survive our idiocy, you know. And what I'm saying is that gives you an entirely different perspective. Why would anybody come here to make sure we don't go there? If you were an alien, would you want us out there? We're a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare.
Right.
A lot of people forget we Earthlings, I'm an Earthling, you're an Earthling, I think, we collectively killed 50 million people during World War II. Are we nice guys? If you're an alien, you'd say, we don't want those guys out here.
Right.
You know, let's put up a wall, so to speak. So what I'm saying is that once you start looking at things realistically, the notion of alien visitors makes sense. What the heck are those guys on Earth doing? Oh, there's something else peculiar about Earth. And most people are shocked when I say this. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. I don't mean the people are the densest.
Sure, I get that.
But a cubic meter of Earth weighs more than a cubic meter of any of the other planets in the solar system.
Really?
And you say, so what? Who cares? Well, it means there are more heavy elements here. Uranium, osmium, rhenium, platinum, rhodium. These are very dense elements. Osmium is twice as dense as lead. We say heavy as lead. Lead is peanuts. So, and you can tell the density of the planet from astronomical measurements and stuff. So they may have been stealing our goodies for a long time. And the very dense elements are rare. You don't find osmium at the local drugstore.
No, not CVS, not Walgreens. I've checked.
No.
It's not there.
No. So what I'm saying is, I think that once you get a number of advanced civilizations sort of close to each other, that they either have to learn how to get along or they clobber each other when they've got H-bombs and so forth. And all it takes is one idiot.
Right.
I hate to say it, but Earth has had plenty of idiots over if we go back in history.
Yeah, so you're probably rooting for artificial intelligence to take over and make some sound decisions and exercise some better.
No, I have faith in human intelligence.
Okay, good.
After all, artificial intelligence are really going to be better. It may be faster at doing certain things.
Sure.
But I don't know that it's going to be somebody I want to trust with the future of mankind.
Probably not. This is where the screenplay starts, right? When you make that decision.
Yeah. So this is all background, but let me mention something. I check my audiences, and I usually mention 4 large-scale scientific studies. I have some slides, tell what's in the studies, and then I ask how many people have read this. I'm lucky if it's 2% have read any of them.
Okay.
I mention this because there are people who are bent on saying, hey, there's no evidence, Stan. I said, well, have you looked at Blue Book Special Report 14? No, what's that?
Huh.
It's the largest study ever done for the United States Air Force. It isn't mentioned in any of the anti-UFO books. When I say it's the biggest study, they looked at 3,201 sightings. The work was done by Battelle Memorial Institute, an outstanding research and development firm in Columbus, Ohio, under Air Force contract. Not only did they look at 3,201 sightings, but they did quality evaluation of all the reports: excellent, good, doubtful, and poor. The better the quality, the more likely to be unexplainable. Overall, only 21.5% were unexplainable. And as proof that the government has lied on occasion, probably many more than one, in the press release that accompanied the report wasn't distributed, but the press release was given very wide distribution way back in 1955. The statement was made by the Secretary of the Air Force, mind you, Donald Quarles by name, a real person, not alive anymore, of course, but he said, on the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those popularly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. But the unknowns weren't 3% or 6% or 12%, they were 21.5%. I call that a lie, because 21.5 is not 3 rounded off, where I come from anyway. So the data is loaded, the report is loaded with data, but practically nobody has read it. I make copies available only, I didn't want to go in the publishing business,
Right.
but only because, why should I believe you? I can't get a copy, I've had somebody say. Well, since it's a government document, it can't be copyright, and anybody can print it.
Wow.
So I have and distributed it. And it makes fascinating me. The longer the duration of the sighting, the more likely to be unexplainable. Right. And the debunkers never talk about Blue Book Special Report 14. They're basic rules for debunkers. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up.
That's one of my favorite expressions.
But the public doesn't know. I'm not going to tell them. If you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's easier and nobody will know the difference anyway. And do your research by proclamation. Investigation is too much trouble, and who's going to tell the difference? So I live by certain rules, and I have found that the nasty, noisy negativists, as I call them when I'm being polite, also live by certain rules, but they're not the rules of logic or science.
And they're not being reasonable either.
No, and they're not being reasonable.
Right.
And, if you can't study the evidence, you're not entitled to an opinion, especially if you're calling it a scientific opinion. I'm sure this isn't the only area that people have been guilty of massive misrepresentation on the part of
yes, just this is the only instance of that. Absolutely. Right.
No. And so I have, like I said, I've given over 700 lectures, and I always take questions, and they're not written questions. I just, whatever hand goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how people are willing to express opinions. Well, I'm sure, one guy said to me, I'm sure one could come to other conclusions than you have. I said, well, as I recall, you hadn't read any of these large-scale scientific studies, right? Well, yes, that's true. What's the difference between us, I said. I gave you my sources of evidence. I've read them all. You've read none of them. Whose opinion's worth more? Right. And I shut up.
Yeah, case closed. Well, can I just get your knee-jerk reaction to a couple of things that have happened?
Sure.
Well, like last week, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it. We have the air traffic controllers report. They don't know what to make of it, and it was British Airways and Atlantic Virgin that both saw these moving around. and it wasn't just one item, but it came up alongside the jet and then shot away. And it was a Boeing 737, and it was a female pilot, and she was a little uneasy about the situation, and air traffic controller said that they couldn't see anything. But then other airlines came in and said they had seen it as well. And it wasn't one, it was multiple.
Yes, I saw that. And it may sound like that's a very unusual case, but there have been many cases like that in the past where pilots, I fly quite a bit, lecturing all over. I'm retiring, but I've lectured all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope we can trust our pilots to be reasonably careful about and acute about what's going on up there. They don't want, because when the plane crashes, they crash too.
Sure.
You can't say, I'll get out of this while I can.
Right.
So pilot sightings are nothing new, and multiple witness radar visual sightings. This case didn't mention radar as far as I know.
Well, they said it wasn't showing up on the radar, and they referenced two different forms of radar. In fact, I've got the article right here. Let me just get you the correct verbiage here. Two more pilots radioed sightings in following minutes. Then they said, let me try and find the exact quote. Yes, they said nothing showing on either primary or secondary radar.
Well, look, advanced technology, again, progress comes from doing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at a lot of work about plasmas in the atmosphere, ionized air. If you ionize the air around the aircraft, you get around all kinds of problems of high-speed flight. One of them is radar profile. Wow. You make the characteristics of that plasma such that it absorbs the radar signal instead of reflecting it. And if it doesn't reflect, you don't see it. There are, for example, and this shocks people, electromagnetic submarines that have been built. And what's special, seawater is an electrically conducting fluid. And it turns out that there's a law of physics that says if you have electric and magnetic fields at right angles to each other, you have a force at right angles to both. You push against the seawater, it pushes back.
Is this the theory that Captain Nemo's Nautilus, that they said that he was generating?
Well, certainly Nemo wasn't talking about it, but
there's been a longstanding theory that you can generate power out of salt water.
Well, I wouldn't call it generating power, but you can cause interesting things to happen. Yes, you push against the seawater, it pushes back, which is kind of neat. That's a law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And
you're saying that there's a couple of submarines already in existence working on that principle?
They were built. They're not in existence. They've been tested. Kawashima in Japan tested one, and a Westinghouse scientist, Dr. Stuart Way, some students in California built one to his spec, and it worked.
Really?
Yeah, and then the program was canceled. That's life, you know. So what I'm saying is, but it illustrates, again, progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. I mean, when I was in college, I used a slide rule, a little device about this big.
Right, yeah.
You can multiply, divide, etc. Nobody uses slide rules anymore. You can buy a pocket calculator for less money than the slide rule cost.
Right.
That progress comes from doing things differently. Mm-hmm. And everywhere we look, new developments replace the old. I mean, I look at this little small computer I have here. What would this have been worth 70 years ago?
It'd have been priceless.
Yeah, I mean, and the internet.
Right.
I mean, you know, you plug in a certain term and it tells you there are 3,476,000 references to that term. Yes. So we need to be very cautious about putting limits on ourselves, no less on aliens. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you allow for the 4 billion year head start, at least that others have over us, is it surprising that they know things that we don't know? Now, why keep the secret? Well, every government would like to be sure that new technology that can be used for military purposes, and special flight vehicles certainly can. I mean, that's what fighter planes are all about, stealth aircraft.
Right.
We don't want our enemies to know what we know about advanced technology. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies.
So your nuclear-powered jets, is it possible that was a program that wasn't actually canceled, but just kind of reappropriated?
Well, I've often been asked about that, but I think it would have shown up as part of, we talked about stealth. We built some stealth aircraft. They may not be the greatest in the world, and there may be a limit. Cost is an important part on, how much.
The bottom line, right?
Yeah. It's so I don't think these programs have gone underground, so to speak. But I can understand they're not wanting to share with our potential enemies. And the thing is, I think what's kept the peace, this is a nuclear guy talking, I guess, but is the fact that our nuclear-powered submarines are always ready to retaliate. The trouble is nobody knows where they are. So if you're willing to risk the other guy dumping an ICBM on you because you're going to take out his source, you can't do it. I know that you can't get my nuclear submarines. You know that I can't get your nuclear submarines. Hey, maybe we mutually assured destruction. I love the term MAD.
Right, absolutely.
But it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's effective, though, in a crazy kind of way.
It works.
Yes, right. So in December, they declassified the footage of, what was it? And I don't know, it was 2014 or 2015. There was fighter pilots that saw, a series of unidentified flying objects. You saw the footage. I know you did.
Yeah.
And that was part of Harry Reid's government program that they have been studying this. That could have been a ruse. That could have been just some misdirection over here while we're really just hiding the good stuff over here. But, you do have the military saying, what's that? And the Chilean Navy, they had a report. And something that happened in Arizona. You got
all over the world.
Yeah, you got pilots, military pilots seeing things.
Yes.
And
if we can't trust them, who can we trust?
Well, it just seems to be that, if when we see UFOs or the FAA or the commercial airline pilots see that and they go, oh, well, that's just probably a drone. That's probably just the military. But then you've got the military saying, what the hell is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And so military witnesses are worth a lot to me because we depend on them to be accurate, not to go off crazy if something strange shows up. They want to really check on what's going on. They have a responsibility and they have the competence, which the rest of us don't have.
Well, so in your opinion, this thing in Great Britain, it is entirely possible that it's...
Yeah, they've been seen for a long time. I mean, look, I started the research on the Roswell incident. That happened in 1947. I didn't start till 1977 on Roswell, but... and I'm convinced that there are other cases of crashed saucers, alien bodies recovered, etc. And again, you can't put that on the open market, so to speak. Here's what we learned from the latest wreckage we recovered. No, right. Because with what we got, with what you got, maybe you can build something I can't build, And it was standard practice, incidentally, in World War II. If an enemy aircraft crashed in England, let's say, you'd go look at the technology. If there's any pieces there, you want to find out, what are these guys doing? How are they doing it? Oh, look at this material.
Well, that's why we built the Glomar Explorer, right?
Be able to go out in the ocean and pick up the goodies.
And pick up that Soviet submarine and find out exactly what they got. That was quite an effort. And they did have the dough and they did go, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the subject of flying saucers brings you in touch with all kinds of notions about space, about mankind, about people, about energy. And again, it makes you humble, realizing, like I say, we didn't discover the darn neutron until 1932. Wow. How advanced would you say we are? That's less than 100 years ago.
Right. Amazing.
How much more is there to discover? that we haven't yet found?
Well, Stan, I think you've given me enough sound bites for me to do a great job, putting this into perspective. I've only got about 6 minutes when I do the spot, but I'll do an abridged version of this on my website and make this into a podcast as well. And again, tell me about that book, your most recent book.
Most recent book is Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers with Kathleen Marden.
Okay.
Who's Betty Hill's niece. The Hill case is the most famous abduction case, Betty and Barney Hill.
Okay.
Up in New Hampshire. And that was back in 1960. But it's that book sets you up for the rest and has loads of references, incidentally.
Is that the lady that I saw you on the DVD that we got from you, where you were out investigating something in the night sky? There were lights that were shining over your head that you couldn't quite explain as you were doing.
Yes, Kathleen Marden.
Okay, that's the lady.
Yes,
okay.
And she's her training is in sociology, and mine is in physics, so it makes a good match. We
absolutely,
cover it from all directions.
Right. Now, that book, is that available on Amazon, or do you want to sell it off your own website?
Well, my website is www.stantonfriedman.com. Very easy. Lists all my books.
And you sell your books off of that as well?
What?
Would you prefer them to buy it off of your website than Amazon?
Well, of course.
Okay.
And I autograph everything I send out.
Well, there you go.
No extra charge for the autograph.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us for this exclusive interview on Intrigue Journal. If you'd like to see more stories like this, please go to intriguejournal.com and opt in for our mailing list and newsletter. Or go to our Facebook page or YouTube channel and click subscribe. If you see any of our posts on Facebook, please be sure to comment, like, and share so that we can spread our paranormal news around the planet. I'm Sean Paul, and this is Intrigue Journal.